Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session. So today I would be presenting on this very interesting paper called CoMAL, Collaborative Multi-Agent Large Language Model Mixed Autonomy Traffic. So, this paper, what it does is that, when you have a planning problem for traffic, which means like you have a group of cars that need to navigate certain areas, traditionally this area has been done using reinforcement learning by feeding in the environment parameters to each car and asking each car to decide, hey, what's my acceleration, what's my velocity, what's my spacing, that kind of stuff. So what this paper tries to do is to ask, could we do some form of cognition using large language models? Maybe we encode the environment from the numbers and from the description of the road shape and everything, we encode them into text, do some collaboration between the different cars, figure out their roles. Some will be leaders, some will be followers. And then after that, based on the leader and follower profile, plan accordingly. Like, the leader should maintain a consistent pace, the follower should, catch up to the leader and so on. So if the cars have some cognitive abilities, perhaps it would do much better than reinforcement learning where, you only have numbers to play around with and, the cars using RL may not even know what they're doing. They're just optimizing some reward. If you convert this problem into a semantic problem, maybe this would do better. So let's see how this works out. All right, so these are the environments. Can you all see the cars moving? Maybe a thumbs up or something if you can see the environments here. Okay, great. So over here, what we can see is that we have 3 different environments that they evaluated on. So they use this driving simulator. The name is called SUMO, S-U-M-O. And from there, you can just create your own tracks. So these are the standard tracks. On the left here is a figure of 8 track, where the cars will zoom around and then there's that intersection that they need to, prevent collision with one another. So you might need to slow down a bit to let the other car pass. All right, over here we have a ring. The ring environment on the right is where the cars just keep moving and moving. And they need to slow down when they hit the tail of the, or they reach the tail of the other side so that they don't collide with the car in front. So you also need to have some dynamic kind of motion planning here. And lastly, at the bottom here, this is called the merge environment, where, like when you have an expressway and then you have one car coming in like that, then the cars coming in, they need to merge with the existing traffic. Okay, so this problem requires some coordination of both the cars on the expressway and the car merging. Okay, and in this environment, there's no signal lights or anything, so it's basically based on the car's position, and then the other car needs to decide whether or not to slow down or increase speed. So quite cool. I think this is still very toy example actually, because these are not really very realistic of the real world. But at least this shows promise that LLMs can potentially function as a cognitive system that also uses a rule-based planner at the bottom. Okay, so the rule-based planner at the bottom is quite important because I really don't think that LLMs can control like acceleration, velocity, and spacing. If you just give them those numbers, what will likely happen is that the cars will crash into one another. So I think LLMs are great for, like saying, hey, I'm the leader, I'm the follower, or you are the follower. The plan is to just keep moving at constant speed. Those kind of stuff could be verbalized in words. But the moment you utter something like acceleration 128 meter per second square, velocity 30 meter per second, that kind of stuff, it's just not natural for a large language model to do. People try to solve math with large language model, that's like barking up the wrong tree. Math should be solved with planners, symbolic planners, research, LMs maybe can provide some general guidance, like, this is a picture, so it's a triangle, so maybe we should look at geometry, there may be some direction, but, all the theorems, lemmas, and stuff, I really don't think the LM is that great at rule following. So this is the same case for this example for self-driving cars as well. Okay. This is not exactly self-driving cars, this is more like group planning. But if you treat each car as independent and you're controlling one car, then perhaps this is self-driving car without the navigation aspect, because like you have a fixed path already. You don't have to like find your way through. All right, and there's also no visual input per se, like you don't have to look at 3D world, you just need to look at this 2D thing. So it's very simplified, but still quite interesting. Let's take a look. So what are the key points of this paper? So actually the RL methods, if you look at it, it's actually not too bad for some environments like the ring environment. So in the environment that is very specified, controlled, like doesn't really change, if you train it long enough, RL actually does pretty well. So yeah, but you need large amounts of specific training data. So, Yen LeCun has this diagram. I'm not sure if you've seen it before, but there's this monster eating a cherry. Okay, and this is like how it looks like. So this is like unsupervised. Oops, this is white color. Let me change this. So you say something like this is um this unsupervised learning, which is basically like stuff that you don't have any labels for, that you can learn from like your own experience and something like that. So we have supervised learning after that, where you have man-made labels and like ImageNet, you train on labels. And then finally we have reinforcement learning, where you train on maximizing reward. So according to the picture of the monster eating the cherry, you can go and Google the Yen LeCun reinforcement learning picture. Yeah. So reinforcement learning actually in the entire scope of learning, it actually occupies a very, very small chunk of your knowledge, because how much can you actually learn through maximizing reward? Like, you think about it, when you play video games, do you actually maximize the score, or do you learn how to play the game cognitively? Like, Super Mario, I want to get to the right side. I don't necessarily want to maximize my score, but, you learn how to maximize while playing the game. Yeah, like other games like, Pong or Breakout, like the ball bounce and hit maybe I just draw this. Like, you have a ball, this Atari game, you have a ball here, and you have a pedal, and then you have some bricks at the top here. So, like, do we actually learn playing this game by, maximizing our score? I wouldn't say so, like, I would say that although maximizing the score might look like the objective, but actually the main aim is like more like to clear the entire top of bricks. Like, so this is something that, reinforcement learning, if they don't really see what it means. Like, hey, uh, my ball doesn't know that I need to hit the bricks to win. Like, it doesn't have that level of understanding. All it does is that, oh, if the ball reaches the position close to this other position, then I get 1 point. It takes a while to learn that. Okay, then another example I like to give is like a child. All right, so if you have a child and like he does something wrong, then you could do something like scold, or like punish the child first and reward. And then child does something right, reward. So we always think that this is the model of shaping behavior and letting the child learn. But if you ask me, because I'm a parent of 2 kids, like, if you just punish the kid or you reward the kid without explaining the reason why, okay, if you just punish, like, if someone punishes you and you don't know why you got punished, it will take you a few attempts, like maybe 3 to 4 different instances, or 10 to 20 instances, before you finally figure out, oh, I got punished because I was wearing spectacles, maybe. Yeah. So this is something that the child may not even learn, because, like, let's say if the thing you get punished for is wearing spectacles, I may not even know that I need to take out my specs before I get rewarded, per se. Yeah, it might be a chance encounter that takes a while. That's why RL has a lot of random exploration. You try to randomly explore until you get some reward. There's this thing called the sparse reward problem. Basically, like, where you only have reward at a very, very difficult to reach sequence of actions. So you may never reach the reward and the system may never learn. So these are all the problems with reinforcement learning. I'm talking a little bit more here because this paper shows that actually using LLMs with some planner can actually win the reinforcement learning that algorithms that have been trained over like many, many iterations on this environment. So this is something quite curious, because OpenAI has been talking about RL, everyone's been talking, oh, if we scale RL up, we get, AGI. My bet is that we won't get AGI with RL, because RL is too environment dependent. You change the environment, you require a ton of training data again in order to learn the environment again. So this is like, AlphaGo, AlphaZero, where, you play black and white stones on the board. So while DeepMind's AlphaGo might have won the world champion Lee Sedol, right? That's for a game of Go, and that took like months of training time. So if, let's say, we were to change the board or change the game, like, same logic, you may not learn those logic, like, because the environment changes, you need to relearn from scratch again. So in the real world, how often is it that the environment is always the same, right? So good luck to self-driving cars learned using RL because the moment you see something like, a snowman on the road, you may not be able um to learn how to navigate that because it hasn't seen that in the training data. So what is lacking here? All right, let's take a look at the next point. By the way, these points are not made by me. Okay, these points are made by the authors of this paper. But I love this paper so much because they say that RL is not that great. And I'm fully supportive of that stance. My 5 years of PhD was meant to find a new way to do RL that led to learning fast and slow. And most recently, Agent Joe, which is a LM agentic framework using memory. Yep. So I do think RL has a lot of pitfalls, and we should avoid using it as much as possible. So yeah, you look at here, like when you have RL output, it's very difficult to understand the decision-making process. Like what exactly is reward 1 versus reward 0? Like what does it mean, right? Like if you look here at this example about the child, like what does the child know when you punish or you reward the child? Very hard. So it's very hard to interpret it. And if you look here, for humans, okay, teenagers or adolescents can learn to drive in just 20 hours and handle unfamiliar situations, which is something we don't really see in reinforcement learning. You will take very long before you learn something. So yeah, these are the key points of this paper. Just pause here for a while. You all have anything you want to add about like what I just said about RL? Any supporters of RL over here? Okay, so I take it that you all agree with what I said. That's good. All right, let's move on. So this is the overall framework of this paper. So you can see that this is the environment. Let's say, for example, we take the figure of 8 that we saw earlier. There are 3 other environments here. I mean, there's 2 other environments, total 3. All right, there's few vehicles, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can go up to 10 plus vehicles, but this is just like some illustration. So what the framework does actually quite simple. You take this environment, you put into some scenario description, which is in text. And you can see the prompts over here. This is their GitHub. So it's actually very, very simple. They did not use any agentic framework. It's just using LLM prompts. All right. Shared messages means like if you collaborate with other people, they might say that, hey, this is my situation, then that's my situation. So you can share your knowledge of the environment with one another. I like this a lot because this is how like multi-agent can communicate with one another. All right. We have the system prompt next, which tells the car like, hey, what is it to do? So this system prompt could be like, hey, find out what role should you take. Should you be a leader or follower? Or the system prompt could be like, hey, do some planning for your velocity, acceleration, and speed, that kind of stuff. This could be the system prompt based on the task given. Then you have some memory over here in the future experience, okay, which has been preceded with some defaults. Later I can show you the defaults in one of the slides. But these defaults can be then updated by the LM agent as it does the experiences. Okay, so at least that's what they say in the paper. I couldn't find the updating of this experience in the code. So maybe I missed it out. But it'll be very powerful if your agent can reflect on all your past experiences and update its memory so that the next time it uses the memory for a few short updates, it's the updated kind of memory. Very powerful. I like this self-learning system. So like there are frameworks like MemGPT that tries to update their memory all the time. I think that's too often. Tries to update memory every iteration or every time you call it. I think that's too often. But I think the memory should be updated at the end of the scenario. All right. So there must be some way to update this memory, like how to update we can discuss. I don't really see much discussion in this paper, but this memory part is very important for learning. So how do you update this memory? How often, what kinds of memory do you gather? So in this case, their memory module is very simple. Their memory module is just some text describing that in this situation, like figure of 8, a follower should be what speed, what velocity, and so on. A leader should be what speed, what velocity. So it's like kind of hard-coded. Yeah. So like I do think that this example is a bit trivial, but the idea of how you can use memory to guide the actions and how your experiences can shape your memory, I think this is something very, very powerful. Okay. And then after you look at all this scenario description, shared messages, system prompt, future experiences, we can then like decide what's my task. Like for example, am I a follower or am I a leader and so on. And also I can say like, hey, what speed should I take? What's my final kind of thing? So like if you look here, after you get your role, for each agent, after you get your role, you then reason over like how do I do it? So this is a chain of thought reasoning. Later I'll show you the prompt for this chain of thought reasoning to get the velocity, acceleration, and spacing. At least this is what I think it is. So I might be wrong, but I think it's velocity, acceleration, and spacing. And over here, this is the execution module, which is like this is called the IDM, intelligent driver module or model, where like they execute into a continuous fluid motion. Okay, so this is very, very clever. Okay, so if you are thinking of using LMs as a way to guide the agent, you don't really want the LM to guide every single step of acceleration, velocity, and so on. That's too slow, right? Just like when a robot moves, you don't want to say, hey, leg up 1 degree, leg up 1 degree, leg up 1 degree, leg up. If you say you have a humanoid robot and you want to use large language models on it, you're not going to guide every single step, like how the leg moves one by one. It's too slow to do that, because like one thing is LMs take time to process, and like stuff like balancing and moving and walking, you kind of need fast reaction. So it's best to hand this over to some planner that can do this instantly. Like this is literally 2 math equations. You can look at the paper. It's some differential equation. I mean, the intelligent driver model is not new. It has been around for a while. It's meant to help a car adjust to its position in real time. So I do think the use of this is very, very useful and very, very needed in this case, because I don't really trust LMs to do split-second decisions like this. All right. So I think this is a very good illustration of an entire working multi-agent pipeline that does the scenario observation all the way to processing what role you want to take, and then after that, doing the reasoning, which will lead to the end outcome that is seconded to some rule-based planner. So this is a very good illustration of a real-life system that could be implemented using LLMs as the cognitive wrapper over it. Questions for this?
Question. I'm not sure if it's a best segment to ask, but you can see. So so what I get from what you just now described is a rule-based planner can be better than LLM-based planner, right? At least for this kind of scenario.
So in this case, the LLM-based planner just needs to get the B, A, and S to give to this rule-based planner, which will then in real time adjust the car's velocity according to your configurations.
Okay, but my question or skepticism is if you still remember like paper like Voyager, I think they are trying to leverage on the fact that a lot of like in real life or even simulated environment, there's a lot of times classical planners simply cannot handle such a complex environment. That's why they want to leverage LLM pre-trained knowledge. For example, in the Minecraft world, how do you know what next step you need to do? Like for human, the reason is simple, is because we have the intuition of the physical world. So we know roughly, maybe next step roughly is do this, do that. Similarly, LLM can also give you a rough heuristic or idea of what to do. Then if I remember correctly, that's how they implement the correction system, right? Let them try first. If it doesn't work, then give the feedback back to LLM to see what's the next step. It's all based on the pre-trained knowledge. So my idea has always been LLM-based planner have this advantage over classical planner, which you need to do search in the search space, which can be first thing computationally expensive, second thing it cannot just cover all unless there's a effective way to do abstraction of the real world, like you account for every single factors, then do search. But it sounds like a very daunting task for classical planner. So I have always been thinking planner has this advantage.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. So you're saying that if you have like in your real-time execution, you give the feedback back to maybe the planner, you can get better results because you can.
Which is the LLM-based planner.
Right. So over here, this is the ideal flow if let's say your LM can be fast enough to do it. But what you could do here is after you do your planning, you get a guide, you get some constraint plan where you already have a plan that is sort of working, but you don't go all the way to the nitty-gritties of like wheel rotation, that kind of stuff. So
That one I agree because LM is better at that. It
right.
can give a very good heuristics, but it cannot go down to those very nitty-gritty details. That one I agree because they require very precise computation
Right.
calculation. Yes.
So over here we are talking about the nitty-gritty details. After you do the VAS, it's very nitty-gritty already. Like you need to go into like, hey, how do I increase my acceleration? What rate should I increase? Those kind of things require some math and calculation.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay, I
so
think I get your point then. Okay.
essentially this one actually comes back here. So what you will see is that in this paper, we don't actually do the feedback from the real-time execution here. No, we don't do this because it's too slow and LMs are not get great with math. But LMs are great to, like say, hey, I'm the follower, so I should follow the leader's speed, that kind of stuff. So you can get these parameters like VAS from the observation of the other cars around it. So these are just the constraints, like, I want to maintain this speed, I want this spacing between me and the car in front. So based on all these constraints, there's this IDM, the intelligent driver model, that will convert these constraints into a real-time, like step by step, what should you do. So I do think the idea of feedback is relevant, and there is feedback because like once every 1 to 2 seconds, we will prompt the planner again to see whether we need to change anything. So I do think this example of like, hey, letting the agents, like after you define a plan, you let the agents carry out the plan. And then once in a while, you just, check whether the plan is working and replan again if necessary. So I mean, I would call this kind of approach as, like plan, but don't micromanage.
Oh, that sounds like a very okay. If I haven't read the paper myself, but according to what you described here, I can agree with this kind of approach. Yes. Yeah, I think it's better at what you call micromanage. I agree.
Yeah, so ideally, we will want each agent to be autonomous in some regard, like they can make decisions within a certain boundary. And I mean, something like, you work for people, you don't want people to tell you, hey, at minute 1, you should breathe, at minute 2, you should breathe out, that kind of, you don't want people to tell you that, like, you want people to say, hey, your role is to code out maybe Agent Joe's new memory wrapper module.
Yes,
Or,
in a way,
and
you
then
are
you do
LM
yourself. Yeah.
is helping the, if you will, the classical planner to drastically reduce their search space, because a lot of search space you can just ignore them by intuition, right? It confirm doesn't work, so but of course you cannot show it, but based on your intuition, which comes in the case of LM come from previous knowledge, it confirm doesn't work, so you just inform the classical planner, don't even bother. So in a way, it's like a combination. The class, like the planner, is like not technically, it's like combining both LM and classical approach, right? It's
Yeah.
not purely
Yes.
one or another. Yeah.
That's why I like the workflow of this paper. I think they have gotten a lot of things correct. Yeah, but I don't agree fully with this paper. You will see why. Okay, because there are some specific details that I think could be done better. All right, so this is the key aim for multi-agent collaboration. Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry, are you okay with the
Oh
answer?
no,
Like,
no, yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
okay, let's move on then. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion. I have a lot of discussion questions today. So let's move to that. All right, so like collaboration module, they will pick out, hey, which role should I take? After that, each agent independently and autonomously develops their plan. Right? This I like a lot because like we don't want to interfere too much with each agent's plan. It's like, when you have a group of companies, each company's CEO maybe meet with one another in some director meeting or CEO meeting, and then each says that, hey, okay, company A, you do X, company B, you do Y. And then each one of them, after they gather in that board director meeting, then they each go and do their own stuff. And they don't interfere with one another anymore. So this is the idea. You collaborate to collectively decide, hey, who should do what, and then individually each of them will then execute their own plans. I think this is great hierarchical execution so that you don't do a lot of redundant effort. So reasoning engine, and then like the takeaway is that, we don't want to, have each agent be constrained to some master planner. Like each agent should take charge of their own situation. So I've been thinking about this, like this driving problem can also be solved if you micromanage every single car, right? Why don't you do that? And I sort of come to the conclusion that it's very taxing to micromanage everyone, because when you have specific situations on the road where each car sees something, and you need to navigate away, sometimes it might be better to let each car just control itself, because then you don't have to spend too much bandwidth. Like okay, maybe the takeaway is not just diversity is important, like you reduce cognitive load on the overall planner. Yeah, because like once each agent can take charge of it itself, the main planner, the overall planner, just needs to focus on the big picture. So I like this approach. Like you really want to reduce cognitive load everywhere in your system. And if your agent can settle itself, but it knows the constraints of which it can act. Like for example, it needs to follow a certain distance from the car in front of it. It can act like it can maybe maneuver to swerve away from a roadblock, but it can go back again to follow that car in front. So because it knows that its task is to be spacing 2 meters from the car in front, so it will just continue to do that. Yeah. So this is quite cool. All right. And then after that, instead of using LLMs to control like wheel rotation and so on, like or acceleration directly, it uses the intelligent driver model in order to do real-time speed control. Lovely. All right. So this is actually what I just mentioned in the earlier slide. So how does the agent does its own planning? All right. First step, it encodes the scenario into text, adds the system prompt, use memory to get the past experiences, get the shared messages from other agents to see what their situations are, and maybe decide who's the leader and who's the follower based on that. Yeah. And get LM response for the task allocation or planning purposes. So it's like either you decide to be the leader or follower from this, or you get your own plan. Right. One thing that like these chat messages I like quite a lot is that in the future, if let's say each agent can do different things as well, and like for example, your overall task might be like, hey, I need to navigate to this expressway. Then one car could say that, hey, I've done this before. This is my memory. So over here in this paper, they don't really share their internal memory to others, because actually all of them have the same internal memory. But suppose each agent has different internal memory. This will be a very good avenue to share knowledge between diverse specialized agents to one another. So much like in a human society where we collaborate with each other, some people are experts at certain domains. So when the task shifts to those domains, these people might share their knowledge with one another in this chat messages section. So this is really quite cool. I think this is a nice kind of pipeline to emulate. Like as we move to multi-agent pipelines, we don't want to receive all information from all the agents. We only want to receive relevant ones, and this can come in chat messages. So yeah, when I talk about all this, I'm actually thinking of the advancements for Agent Joe into the multi-agent pipeline also. Yeah, this is I think quite a nice quite nice way to do it. All right, so system prompts. All right, so what's the system prompt here? So the system prompt will always change based on the task. So in this case, like the task is to plan the speed now, right? So your task is you are the brain of the vehicle. Please make the decision to optimize the average velocity. This is the map, consists of 2 straight lines. So like this thing has been converted to this text description by a human, by the way. They didn't use image tools for this. So this is already like hand drafted. Yeah. So the perturbations caused by vehicles entering through the RAM leads to formation of congested waves downstream, right? So this is your speed, this is your position, these are the other vehicle stuff. So you give all this in the system prompt, and yeah, basically I don't think the LM is that great at looking at all these numbers here, but overall, what would likely happen is that they will see who's the one that is at the front from this. I think that might be a better way to do this. I mean, this is great to get you the description of the map and stuff, so on, but LMs are not that great for text-based position. Maybe we might need to use a vision model for this, and maybe it could be such that like by default, because this is a convoy kind of thing, right? By default, you could already have a leader and just follow that leader unless special circumstances happen. Okay, like for example, like engine breakdown, wheel issues, that kind of thing. Like if I just feel like by putting all these numbers into the LM, it can sort of confuse it. Yeah, so I'm not too sure whether the LM is the best way to be a synthesizer of all this information, because numbers are not really the strong point of a large language model. It might be possible that we might need to abstract it into a higher level of abstraction, saying that, hey, I'm the leader of this group of vehicles. What speed should I plan? And these are the obstacles I see in front of me. Like, what should I do? I mean, maybe it should be something higher level without all the numbers. And the numbers could be all given to rule-based systems. So at least it's my opinion. So I think they probably need one more level of rule-based automation below this, right? See, LMs encode numbers is not that great, right? But let's just give some credit to the paper. This kind of works for some environments. So let's see what else did they do for the paper. So collaboration, all right. So this is how collaboration is done. They do it over a few iterations, like I think 2 or 3 iterations, where everyone would just blurt out what they have, and then they will decide who to follow. So like, oh, this vehicle 1, I propose this, and then the vehicle 2 will say, okay, I agree with you, and then okay, thank you all. This is my leader. This is my role. So like their role decision, they will do until they decide on one role. So it's either follower or leader. So there's only one leader. So this is where I think that it's quite cool that the cars can collaborate and stuff. But it is in a conversation way. They did not use autogen. They use like LM calls one by one to simulate a conversation. I just think that this is too verbose, too much time to coordinate. I mean, in this case, like a figure of 8, I mean, it's quite clear that the guy at the front is the leader, right? Like, so, okay, over here, like, why don't you just define one leader, right? One leader, okay, maybe one leader can take the inputs and then say that, hey, okay, this is the way ahead. Okay, I'm going to round this bend. Be prepared for a bend ahead. Okay, and then everyone will just follow whatever the leader says. Yeah. So I think this is something that might be better, because there's no point in all the cars having a conversation each time round. We want to say, hey, who's the leader, who's the follower? I mean, in this case, figure of 8 like that, it's quite obvious the guy at the front is the leader, right? Like, will you follow the guy at the back? Not really, right? Yeah. So I think this step is maybe needed if the cars can change position dynamically somehow, like but I don't foresee that to be happening in the traffic convoy, right? Like normally the guy at the front is the leader. So I need to ask the authors of this paper, like why did they need to do this dynamic role adjustment? Because in all the environments I've seen, I don't really see a need for this. All right. So yeah, just a food for thought. All right. So this is I mean, maybe like once you reach the intersection here, this person might be the leader, because there might be someone that needs to cross. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. I just feel like it's just too much effort to converse and decide on the roles when you can predefine the roles beforehand. Like, in military units, when they go out in the field, who's the captain is already well defined, right? It's only when the captain is down, then someone will take over. So I'm thinking that here we could already have predefined roles even before you enter the field. All right. Hey, so now this is an interesting path, and I think this is the part that like also Derek, you just came. So I think this is the part that Derek will be very interested in, because this is about how to convert LLM-based cognition into very rule-based planning. All right. So this part here is actually chain of thought. Like, so like, for example, after they decide that, hey, I'm going to be the leader. All right. Then as the leader, I will then say that, okay, I do chain of thought. Okay, my role is the leader. Next, okay, this is my position right now. Okay, and then after that, you will then decide, okay, this is what I will do. I will move slowly and steadily. And then after that, it converts into acceleration, velocity, and spacing, right? So this will then pass on to the rule-based planner to do the real-time control. But you can see all these things start from whatever role that you have gotten, like leader, and then you decide, okay, what's my role? What's my position right now based on the environment? And then what should I do now? Okay, so to ask me frankly, I think like even this motion instruction based on the scene, like, actually, no, LMs are not needed. Because, if you ask me like how to like navigate this band, let's say for example, if this is a band, right? Like, okay, I think this environment doesn't have like wheel rotation, they just follow the track. Okay, what actually this should be done is that it should be you should hand over to a navigation rule-based system, to just say follow, to like maybe like follow track or something like that, AVS. Yeah. So you could follow the lane markings and move as well, right? I mean, what's the point of having this? I want to move slow and steadily. Like, I want to move fast and rapidly. I don't know why this is needed. All right. So yeah, I think there's some room for improvement here because LMs may not be the best to do all this. Like, say I need to increase speed, I need to decrease speed. It might be better to just base on like really just like some collision avoider. Like if you already know that there's a car here and the car in front here, surely there must be a rule-based program that can navigate all this. Like you don't use an LM for this. So I agree that they hand it over to a planner. I disagree that the planner is that low level. Actually, the planner can be a bit higher level. Like you can encompass more of the stuff for the planning. So yeah, at least that's my thoughts.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I feel I feel similarly as what you mentioned just now, but I feel like they didn't, like on a broader topic of navigation, right? I think it still makes sense, but it just, I feel the example, the specific case it chose is very poor to demonstrate the point.
Yeah, I mean it's a toy example.
This environment, if I remember correctly, the just now the circle one, right? That phenomenon only happens for like real life.
And
Yes, exactly. So imagine if you have a centralized way to coordinate all the cards, this won't happen. So, and because the environment is so simple that you do not need the heuristics from the LM to perform any of these tasks. So I also don't see much point of using LM as a planner here. Yeah.
I agree. Although I would say that their framework of mapping the LM to coordinate and to like go back down to like the planner. I think that pipeline, like this pipeline I think is quite useful. It's just that in this framework for this particular problem, a lot of the stuff like the shared messages is like who's the leader. I think those are not really very very important
Actually,
combination.
why do you even need a leader? You just need a centralized coordinator. Doesn't need to be any of
You
them.
need a leader to set the pace for the cars.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do agree, but my issue is I think they're trying to get the LM to do too much. I'm guilty of this. When I try to test stuff, I try to push the LM because I don't want to look up something. I don't want to like, write off the code myself. But honestly, it's like Shang said, it's the heuristics allow you to get a lot done. I just think they need to focus on using the transformer strength, the LLM strength, which is pattern matching. So I think they need to focus a lot more on centralizing the LLM and getting it to specialize on pattern matching, and then letting other software do some of the more niche heavy lifting, because it's cool. Like I really like, it's very broad, it's very cool that they kind of have the LLM do start off the kind of like reasoning process, and then they have it matched to a planner to use, similar to like Agent Joe, which I like a lot. It's very streamlined, very simple to understand. But again, it's just I feel they're not optimizing really. And a lot of papers are going to be like that, where they come up with a really good idea, but then you go through the idea through the paper, and then you see like the potential for optimization. I think a lot of papers are going to come out like that with like neurosymbolic architectures and ideas.
Indeed. So I do think the future of cognitive agents is a lot of integration with specialized software actually. Like, so, OpenAI has been trying to go the approach that LLM is all you need. Let's put reasoning tokens in LLM like OpenAI O1. Maybe in the future, let's put tools inside the LLM so that the LLM can generate the tools as though they are using it. I don't know, but I mean, I do think that that's not the path towards improving the agents. The path towards improving the agent is to use stuff that are really great right now in terms of rule-based systems. Just use them as the backbone, all right? And then just wrap the cognitive layer above it. So as much of the as much of the task should be done by rule-based system as much as possible because they are reliable, all right? And the LM will just do the like choosing which path to take, like more high-level decisions. So it's, I mean, the analogy is like humans, right? Like us. When we decide to do something, like for example, if I decide to go out of my house today, like how I walk, I don't need the LM to plan that, right? Like I just need to say, hey, I'm going from here to the bus stop. Then somewhere in my head, the navigation module can take over, and then you can control the legs and so on. Like sometimes you have this feeling that you don't even know that you are moving. You just move back to your house, right? So like you don't need the LM to actually plan every single thing. Yeah. So I mean, I think this is the same as what Derek's saying, right? Like you can offload more of it away from the LM. Is that correct?
Yeah, precisely. We're all saying the same thing. We just need to focus on offloading and letting like lower level, I guess you call it like muscle memory, but obviously in computers it's heuristics and symbolic coding. Just let it take over and do all of the heavy lifting because it's good heuristic. Is why we wrote it in the first place. Is because it's based on something that works really, really well, and we just wrote out the code for it as a general rule. So just letting all the symbolic coding that we've done in the 20th century, just letting that do all the work for us and letting LLMs focus on the higher level stuff, the pattern matching, I wouldn't say planning, but like the matching to the high level plan or coming up with new generative planning and then letting the symbolic planning do all the specific work and all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, cool. I think we are all aligned here. All right. So yeah, the reason why I chose this paper is because they have the pipeline quite well illustrated. It's just that like certain parts of the pipeline, I don't agree why they are doing it. I suspect it's because they are just testing the limits of the LM, which I think is a fair bet. It's just that for production systems, we probably don't want to do something like this. All right. So yeah, just wanted to show you all the memory. All right. So IDM stands for the intelligent driver model, which is the two differential equations I didn't show. Are you interested? You can search for IDM. It's not specific to this paper. It's a driving thing. Like a lot of people use it. So for this, like you can see the memory for the three different environments they have: figure 8, ring, and merge. Like they already gave the best strategy here. In fact, there's a typo, but yeah, the best strategy is to help vehicles pass the 8. So then they gave some illustration of like what the agent should do. So like when you do chain of thought based on that flow earlier, the memory can actually help with the chain of thought. So then they also give like the IDM planners like, okay, leader slowdown is this, follow up is this. So in some sense, I feel like it's a little bit hard-coded because they already said like, okay, this environment, this is your approach, this is your follow-up, in traffic jam, this is like that approach, and this is your follow-up. And I think this is something that like yes, sure, you can get some like fixed rules, and then as the environment changes, all right, we should update these rules accordingly. Okay, that I did not really see the code to update this memory, although the paper did say that as the environment changes, you update the memory. I just guess the environment is not changing in this case, right? Yeah, so there's no need to update this memory, but adaptive memory update, very important. That's something that I'm going to focus on. I want to right now most LM benchmarks are on static problems like GSM8K, the math dataset, MMLU, the MCQ dataset, all don't change. Those are bad environments. Like when the first version of Agent Joe Task Gen, right? I did like dynamic maze navigation. I did like those kind of stuff that will change, like escape room, navigation. Yeah, I think those are more realistic benchmarks for LM based agents. Plus the real world, you don't expect the world to be static. Right now, you can see over here, this memory, everything is static. And that's because their environments are static. Okay, so I think it's a great starting point. Once we move to dynamic environments, I'm quite curious to see whether, they are able to update this. Okay, and yeah, I do think that this is a bit too low level abstraction. Probably the LM shouldn't even be doing this kind. The LM should just be doing like, I should slow down, I should increase speed, I should catch up. So I mean, the LM would do this kind of thing. In fact, even this kind of things might already be done with like some position-based sensor. You may not need the LM to say I should slow down or catch up. Like the LM should do something like, I should take road A, I should take road B, Okay, so I mean, practically in a self-driving car, I would expect the LM to take a higher level role than to say that, hey, I should catch up with the car in front of me. Yep. So it's just that in this case, it's a convoy following. So catching up with the car in front is important for the metrics. Okay, so this is just an example of how like preceding the memory, some examples could already help improve the performance. Later you can see if we take away this memory, the performance will be affected. So this is the intelligent driver model. Oh, I realized I put the slide in. So this is like, you have some velocity, you have some, where's my S? S, I think, is the distance between the cars, the velocity and the acceleration that you can get. And over here, you can see this is the two differential equations that govern this. So all we need to do is to pass in the IDM, these three parameters, and then hooray, everything gets done using these two math equations. I'm not going to go through the math because I think this is not important for today. Like, this is basically just saying that we can offload some stuff to rule-based planners. All right, so these are the benchmarks. There's a few benchmarks based on the three environments with different cars. So you can see the very interesting thing is that they did benchmarks with humans. So like they actually let humans control the car and 1 autonomous vehicles, and like 0 humans and 14 autonomous vehicles. And you know what they realized? They realized that with more automated vehicles, like in fact just having 3, I remember correctly, it significantly improved the human performance on the metrics, which is like how fast the cars are moving, how much delays are the cars experiencing. So there's reduced delays, there's improved traffic speed with just like three of these cars on the road, which goes to show something, right? Like humans are not very good drivers. So if you already have some like benchmark or goalpost to help you to go around the ring, maybe, or figure out it, like at a certain speed, you avoid the collisions, you essentially stop less. Yeah, so I think that's because like maybe this automatic or this autonomous cars, they already have been preceded with like optimal velocity. It'll be interesting to see whether, if I just change the road dimensions a bit, I precede with those memory, whether like this inserting this autonomous vehicles, is it as beneficial as what is claimed in this paper, right? So yeah, there's other stuff like rings, like, and much like how much of this cars coming in is it autonomous and how much of it is human. All right, so let's see the results. So what are the metrics they use? The metrics is average vehicle speed for all the vehicles, and the higher the better because we want higher speed, so that you spend less time in the traffic. And next we have standard deviation of vehicle speed, which measures like how much the cars move fast and slow. So we want it to move on average about the same speed. So the smaller this value, the better. So average vehicle speed, the higher the better. Standard deviation of vehicle speed, the smaller the better. So you can see like for human drivers, like if you just evaluate on human, you can see that human drivers drive pretty well on the ring. Like they literally do. But if you do figure of it, I suspect because of the intersection, it may not have the most optimal speed to drive at to prevent collision. So this is something that is a little lower. And I also suspect that the human driver side would take a little less risk than this this self-driving car thing, because like if let's say there's a possibility of a collision, usually because I drive, like I would slow down just in case, so maybe this is why, like, it may just be the humans being a bit safer. All right. And merge, you can see that in general is also much lower than having autonomous vehicles using the CoMAL architecture. And standard deviation using AI is much more consistent. And I mean, it's understandable. Like, this AI has been preceded with some ideal speeds for the IDM. And this AI also is, doesn't really have the, like, if once the plan is formed, it just follows the plan consistently because of the rule-based planning, right, which the IDM. So I can fully understand why this AI is much better. So as I said, humans are not the best drivers. We drive well enough. So if your road is driven by autonomous vehicles, I can assure you that the traffic flow will be smoother. Right? You can see a lot less people cutting in front of you, which is really irritating. Yeah. So I do see a future with self-driving cars, and this is a very, very small baby step towards it. It just shows that self-driving cars, with rule-based planners can be very useful. And let's see the involvement of each module. So if we remove away the perception, which is like, I don't tell what the road shape is, you can see that if I take away the perception, it's essentially the memory module is not able to pick up the right memory, because, like, I don't know if it's figure of 8, I don't know if it's a ring. So compared to, like, the best architecture, the higher the better, by the way. This average speed, like, is much lower. So if I take away just the memory, holy, this is very, very low. All right. Okay, but for merge, it doesn't seem to affect too much. So this highlights my suspicion that, like, the memory preceding is important, because if you don't precede the memory, like, it doesn't do as well, right? So what if we don't do anything at all? If we don't have anything at all, like, we take away the collaboration, again, without communication is also quite bad. Okay, if we take away all three of them, yeah, surprisingly, if we take away all three, sometimes it performs better than with perception. Yeah, so I guess it's very hard to draw a conclusion from this. Yeah, but one conclusion is that, having all three is beneficial. Yeah, by having some, like perception without memory, or memory without perception, it harms the different environments differently. Yeah, so overall, I think it's quite clear that all these are important, and the collaboration is also very important, because it can then determine who's the leader and who's the follower. Like, you don't want everyone to be leaders, because in this case, you want to have a speed to follow. Yeah. So let's see how it performs against reinforcement learning. So the baseline is the IDM, just basically having the planner itself without any collaboration. You can see that this is the baseline. If you look at the previous slide, it's the slide with no perception, no memory, and no collaboration. Yeah, so it's already like maybe a preceded V, A, and S for every car. Yeah, so this is the baseline. RL frameworks, I believe what they do is they just put in the environment observation of all the other cars, velocity, acceleration, position, and try to ask the car to determine its own velocity and acceleration. And yeah, basically these RL frameworks are here. And overall, you can see that there's also evolutionary strategies, which is actually not really RL, it's more like genetic. I think it's more like genetic algorithms, where you mix and match the best performing cars over generations, and you can see it actually does very well. So I mean, I wouldn't consider this RL. I actually think this genetic algo based stuff is suitable for population based learning. Yeah, just choosing the best performing agent for each generation and putting them in the next generation, I think that is a very useful way of doing self-improvement. And this is what evolution does in nature. I have to go and read more about this ES. Okay, I believe it's genetic algo, but I'll go and read up more, and I'll let you know whether it is. I mean, it does sound like it. So yeah, if you look at it right now for RL methods, just look at the traditional PPO and TRPO, which is the model-free reinforcement learning. Like, it generally like learns pretty okay. Okay, it learns pretty okay. In fact, it does pretty well for, I think FE0 was the one with humans and only one. Let me see again. FE0 is, yeah, 13 humans and one CAV. Yeah, it does pretty well for that. But once with more CAVs, it doesn't seem to coordinate very well in the multi-agent setting. So like these two are perhaps because they don't really communicate with one another. Yeah, there's a new version of PPO. It's called MAPPO, MAPO, multi-agent PPO. So maybe it will perform better for this. Yeah. So overall, you can see that at least CoMAL is not too bad for these two cases. Okay, but if you look for the rest of it, I mean, you can see over here what I was talking about earlier, like asking the LM to decide whether you want to move faster or move slower, may not be the best bet because of cognitive abilities to understand the map and so on. Okay, look at all these RL environments. Okay, I mean, this paper, when they tried to advertise this paper, they said that they are better than RL. But if you look over here, actually RL is better.
I mean, this is like a perfect environment for RL.
Yeah, correct. So if you ask me like why is this the case? It's because these environments don't change. So in terms of RL, if you already memorize a certain velocity to enter, based on the position, like based on the state, you have certain movement trajectories. You can sort of hard memorize all these answers, right? And I think this highlights something. It means that low-level actions may best be trained using RL. Okay, why do I say that? Okay, as much as I don't really like RL, I must admit that they are best at doing things that have no semantic meaning. So for example, a robot leg move up, right? The position of the robot leg move up like that. How do you express that in words? Robot joint moving 22-degree up forward. Torque is 152 joules, and like the sidewards motion is like this. Gravity is this. Like all this physics stuff, all the forces acting on your body. How are you going to describe them? Like you can describe like what I just said, but how are you going to make sense of it? Like, do we make sense of all these numbers? Not really, right? We still plug them into a calculator and use some physics to calculate stuff. Like when the apple dropped on Newton's head, did he say that, oh, I got it. Gravity is equals to, what? Force divided by, oh, I forgot the formula. For F equals mg, right? Force divided by mass. Yeah, did he say that to calculate gravity? Not really. Yeah. So I think this is the same for LMs. Like we don't think in terms of equations, neither do we think in terms of numbers. Like we just think in terms of broad goals. Like we want to head to this direction, and then like your legs get moving there. So how do we actually move our legs there? How do we keep our balance? Think about it. How do we keep our balance as humans? Do we calculate some math equations based on the position of our body, position of all the joints? Like you don't really receive that kind of information to your consciousness. Like, but you know how to balance, like, and how. Perhaps really there's some way of doing RL in the brain, but it's more towards the lower level where, like in order to maintain balance, it's like the RL has this environment where you have this cut pole, right? You have to maintain balance of this pole, and then like you can move the pole left or right, and you need to maintain the balance of it. Yeah. Very, very hard to describe in words. Like
I feel like this kind of, like the balancing of humor. My take is like the way we do it is, I feel it's more akin to fuzzy logic. You roughly know if, oh yeah, two towards the left or right. We constantly adjust, subconsciously adjust it. Yeah, I think it's less of RL but more of fuzzy logic.
So there's something missing here in the large language model, and that missing thing is it might be symbolic logic, where like if I move left, the pole will move right, that kind of stuff. That could be some form of reasoning logic that is encoded in a graph form. Yeah, not in the LM. LM, you cannot encode reasoning in text. Very difficult to enforce. So I think there's something missing with the LM architecture that can be augmented with this kind of rule-based approach or external knowledge bases. And as much as I don't like RL, maybe RL is needed after all for these low-level actions. Like if I ask the robot to move forward, I don't expect the LM to receive information about the sensor positions, joint angles, and so on. That is not its forte. LMs don't do this kind of stuff. But if you do like some form of model predictive control, maybe like takes in this like for example, like the IDM, right? It's a kind of model predictive control. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's some form of system that is already predefined. So this kind of system here is what is missing in like controlling robots with LLMs. Like you don't want to do all this with LLMs. You want to pass this to some model, right? And my only gripe about this paper is that they pass too little to such models. Like actually, I'm just wondering whether a totally rule-based thing could work for this, and then we can just change the rules a bit. Maybe like instead of having the car having full control of it, you could just say like, yeah, car have maybe 3 modes. Mode 1, follow. Mode 2, maintain speed. And then mode 3, stop. Yeah, so maybe if you just have like these 3 modes and then let all the rule-based thing do accordingly to the given mode, maybe that will work well. I mean, in games, actually, they call it a state tree, where like finite state machines. Okay, so maybe the finite state machines. So I'm not sure if you play games like Red Dead Redemption, where, you know, like, let's say you are here. This is your guard. This is the guard in the game. And then like, this is you. And, you know, at first the guard could be in idle mode. Once you approach the guard, you know, idle, then you can become aggressive, you know, that kind of stuff. And then like after a while, it then goes back to idle again. Like, so maybe the LMs are more suitable to select the mode that we operate in. And then within that mode itself, you know, let the rule-based stuff to do its job. Yeah, and yeah, I do think finite state machines have gotten some kind of I mean, it feels realistic in games, although sometimes, you know, the guard after a while you attack it, after a while you go away, and then the guard will just forget that you have attacked it. Yeah, so in games it's missing some form of memory. So, but the idea of finite state machines and you have different states to go in to, and you know, maybe I could just select these states. I'm quite confident that like, you know, all these things here would increase, because like your mode could be like wait for traffic, or your mode could be join traffic aggressively. So like based on this, like you could actually change, you could actually improve the joining speed for this merge. Yeah. Okay, so I don't want to comment. Yep. So
yeah,
yes.
I was saving my thoughts for the end. So with that in mind, the finite state machine and the neurosymbolic approach, moving forward, do you feel it would be better to move forward with pure neurosymbolic agentic framework? And all we need to do is just keep optimizing the neurosymbolic side and all of the the connections and everything. And do you feel that would be a much better investment to gain much more improvement, as opposed to the RL side and taking what we have right now in this agentic framework and just integrating RL as one of the abstraction spaces to connect between like the LLM and then the low level planning stuff and symbolic stuff? Because in my mind, I do feel that your like your state machine idea and the other symbolic stuff, adding into and improving and optimizing upon the neurosymbolic approach, could possibly surpass just adding in RL as an abstraction space. But my instinct tells me that RL is still probably really good for a lot of things, just because humans, for me, RL is computerized muscle memory, basically. Like our muscle memory is very low level, right? Like we don't know what we're doing. So we, as a baby, so we throw our arms around and we just develop muscle memory. It has no semantic meaning, no logic. It's just pure RL, muscle memory. That's all muscle memory is to me personally. So I feel like the same is true probably for machines if we're trying to make them more intelligent and more human-like. So I still feel RL might be a better approach to integrate as an abstraction space, you know, kind of like just to be the in between like the low level planning symbolic stuff and then the pattern matching and the transformer high level in my mind. But it could be that maybe with machines we can just purely optimize neurosymbolic approach with like your symbolic ideas, the state machine ideas, and optimize how the LLM pattern matches and how it works as a central controller. And maybe that is far better than trying to go down the more human RL approach as an abstraction space. But those are just my thoughts. So I'm just trying to figure out which approach might be best for future investigation and research.
Okay, so I think all approaches are fine. Like the RL approach that you embed into your actions, like for example, the IDM planner in this case could be refined using RL. Yeah, I mean deep RL or traditional RL, like as long as the that space for the action has no semantic meaning, but you have a lot of different inputs like force, velocity, and so on. Like maybe that's a great problem for RL because then it can figure out in the black box how to optimize it. So then you just need to call this RL planner to say, hey, I want to make my velocity 2 meter per second square, and then the RL just does its job. Yeah, so that's one way. For example, the second thing you're talking about is the symbolic planning at the top level, where you do like finite state machines and so on, maybe neuro-symbolic logic for reasoning and so on. I think those are potential like planning abstractions. And I think for those, like some people have tried to use RL for that also to like choose the best way to plan based on RL. I disagree with that because I do think that one thing RL is good at is that RL is great at optimizing, but the flip side is RL is bad at adapting. RL is bad at adapting. So we should use RL for situations whereby we know that like given this particular input sets, you won't change the way the output works. Like for example, in this car thing, based on your acceleration and velocity, your car will always move the same way, right? So this is what the RL stuff is great at. Okay, if in the real world, like you put in this velocity acceleration, maybe your tire is punctured, so you don't move as fast. Perhaps this one won't affect the RL system too much because like RL system just have velocity acceleration. So once the tire is punctured, it will just increase the wheel rotation accordingly to hit that velocity. So I mean, it's in cases like this where, even when the environment changes, that system itself doesn't change. I think RL is great for that. Yeah, so I think RL should be used more for the lower level actions and not too much for planning, because you don't want the plan to be too constrained to what you have learned in your training set. Yeah. So the higher we go, the less RL we should use. That's my intuition.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I'm saying. So basically, really, it's that RL should be used as very low level, kind of like optimizing and muscle memory, really. And the optimizations that we can make at higher levels, like finite state machines, are more abstract concepts, more abstract symbolic stuff, can also be integrated at the higher level to kind of constrain and ground the LLM, and also at the lower level for much more precise and very low level stuff beyond even the RL controller system. It's kind of what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so this one we'll know more once we integrate more with real life robots and stuff, which will happen in a few more years. Not so soon. I don't think we'll
Yeah.
get robots anytime soon with LMs. Like there's still a lot more work to be done with the memory module. Yeah. So yeah, I've reached the end for today's the main session. So now let's spend about like 15 minutes or so talking about the discussion. So how this works is that I will go through the questions one by one, and then if you have anything else to add, we'll just add. Okay, so like first, scenarios are relatively simple with toy examples. Will this scale to the real world? Okay, so I give my answer first. Like I think they need to scale. They need to have more perception modules, like maybe like vision and so on. Like environment will need more more inputs, like for example vision as well, like so this other stuff. And also like for the memory, you need multimodal memory. So there's a lot of things to be done, but in general, like I think collaborating with the agents, each agent does its own planning, like the hierarchical agents concept with planning first, and moving to individual it can likely stay. Yeah, so this is my thoughts on it. Any other takeaways for our first question?
I think the RL benchmark would be worse.
For this kind of for this kind of multimodal environments, right?
No, for more leaning towards the real world setting.
Exactly. So if we have a more real world benchmark, I'm sure those self-driving companies will have some benchmark out there. If you use RL on it, I'm quite sure RL would perform quite poorly.
So I was expecting the result on their method improve in comparison to RL.
Correct. Yeah. So this is a promising framework. It's just that the problem needs to be scaled a bit more for the results to be showed more significantly. Okay, let's move to the next question. Could there be a more efficient way of discussion rather than discussion with all the agents? Okay, because right now when all the agents discuss, they actually discuss with all the groups of agents together. So like, could there be localized discussion? Like for example, like convoy 1 discuss among themselves, and then convoy 2 among themselves. Like, so this is the principle of like too many conversations or too many people in the conversation spoil the discussion. Yeah, I mean, I just came out with this phrase, but like in group meetings, if let's say you have 5 people, oh, the discussion is very active, very great. You have 100 people, like how are you going to get the inputs for everyone and consolidate them? It's just too hard to do that. And like, because I was in the military last time, so like in the military, there's a very efficient way of doing things is that you split into groups, subgroups, and so on. Like they call it companies and sections and so on. Yeah, so there's ways of hierarchy whereby the groups get smaller and smaller, and then they just discuss among themselves. So the small groups discuss among themselves, and then like the convoy leaders could discuss amongst themselves after that. Like, so I think this might be a way to reduce like a bit of latency and improve the performance of this by discussing it locally. All right. But one curious point to note is humans don't discuss when we're on the road. All right. When you're on the road, you don't have a chat room with WhatsApp or so on to talk to the driver beside you. Hey, I'm going to cut in front of you. Please give way, right? We don't do that. So this question I have to ask you, how do humans communicate with one another without talking while driving? Anyone? What means of communication do we have?
Signal.
Yeah, signal lights, correct. What else?
Hand signals.
Hand signals. And also the last one is the horn, all right? So it's like, Bodo, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm about to say that horn. Sometimes we are able to listen some ambulance horns and car horns. Adding audio input also can improve the performance.
Okay. You're speaking a bit softly here, but I get what you're saying is that you can communicate with audio like horns. That's correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So like for police cars, sometimes they also have radio. They can, like tell you to stop by like hijacking a radio. But in human societies with driving, it's quite curious, right? Like for this like for example CoMAL, they need so many parameters like velocity of car and so on. Humans, we know nothing about the velocity. Maybe you only know your speedometer, what's on it, and we can really know whether we are going to overtake, whether we're not going to overtake. So this is the question I have for you. How do humans know whether you can overtake a car or not? Any answers? Like if visually, how will you know whether you can overtake?
I mean, we do have a consensus, right? For all the drivers has passed they have a lessons. They have to pass some form of training. Then by the time most of them has already reached a consensus of what to do under what kind of circumstances. So there's like this unspoken agreement between all for human, all the drivers.
Yeah, that is true. But it's like that consensus is very vague. Like when you're driving and stuff, because every person has a very different driving experience. So we're all just consenting together and just kind of already knowing what everyone else knows. But it's very vague. Like it's not very rule based. Like there are like high level rules rules and stuff that we all follow, we generally get. Like I can tell you, hey, maybe don't try to cut off a car that's clearly faster than you, because you could measure that and everything, right? Like that's a very logical and intuitive. But at the low level, how do you know that? You have to have that intuition and instinct, because driving on the road is fast. You have to be able to react quickly and to like have all this intuition click at once. You have to have enough light bulbs that you go off at once and recognize, hey, this guy is driving off, is probably trying to get into the further lane, probably trying to speed up. I should slow down and avoid a collision, right? But these are all instant kind of like, I wouldn't say calculations, but like instincts that click instantly when we're driving. And again, I feel that might be a place for RL, because there's all these things that we recognize, but they don't really have any meaning. They're just stuff we just know just from driving experience. And I feel that RL would be great for that, because again, it's unchanging. The rules are unchanging, but how we know those rules are very complex and require essentially experience and training. You have to train on the road and get used to people and how they drive, and then you pick up on those instincts, you learn them via that experience. So I feel RL would be perfect for this. Perfect for like learning these rules and stuff. And then you can program the rules. Like, well, let me rephrase. You could decide the rules at the high level for when you're designing these architectures for like automated roads. And then you can train the RL on it at the low level. But I do want to emphasize, you need to keep that RL very low level, because if you let the RL do too much, it's not going to be as flexible.
Not as adaptable. Like once the moment your world model changes, it will take very long to update it.
But yeah, RL for learning stuff like this would be beautiful, and I'm very excited to see the future of it.
Okay, so I get that. So like maybe RL can learn lower level rules. Right. So actually what I was also trying to hint at is that, like human vision goes by relative motion. Right. So I think I wanted to ask about the overtaking. How do you know whether you overtake the car? Like back then when I was in the Navy, like how do we know whether a ship will overtake another ship? Is actually by the angle of the other ship needs to be drawing away from you. Like it needs to be going further and further to your left or further and further to your right. The moment the angle is about the same, so it's always like at your same angle, 20 degrees, you're headed for collision. So human vision is actually quite good at telling whether things draw away from you. And that kind of heuristic can inform humans like, hey, I'm the one that can overtake, or hey, I cannot overtake. Okay, I mean, although I say like that, on the railroad, I've seen instances where the thing draws away and then suddenly the guy just overtakes by increasing his accelerator, forcing me to jam brake. Yeah, so these are examples of bad people that they just want to make your life bad. Yeah, but apart from this, we actually have a very good way of processing vision input that would go beyond just the numbers of acceleration and velocity. Like you really could know whether or not there will be collision or not just from looking at things. And I think this is something lacking in this environment. Like once you put in this vision, perhaps you might perform better, right? So I'm not sure why humans did like poorer than the AI for the figure of eight. Maybe it's because it's very hard to gauge movement just from the 2D pixels. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's some good stuff here. And how do you discuss without talking? You basically, okay, let me just look at this. Like you basically limit it only to the bare essentials. Limit discussion. And over here, what are the bare essentials? If you look at signal lights, the bare essential is I'm turning left, I'm turning right. Or if you put like your handbrake, not handbrake, you put your hazard light, my car is experiencing a fault. Or like please slow down drastically because I'm going to stop. Yeah. So there are different ways to communicate, and all these things. I mean, it's limited because we only have this few stuff on the car, but just this is enough to ensure safe navigation already, and that's cool because LLMs like to talk a lot. What if we limit their discussion to only like, hey, I'm going to cut in front of you, or hey, I'm maintaining my speed. So like maintaining my speed means I don't signal anything, maybe. Yeah. So if we have a very, very refined way of communicating with one another only in a very specific scope, Okay, let me just write this down here. It's very important. Communicate in a very succinct way with a very specified and narrow scope. Right? That's enough. Right? You don't need to talk to each other in poems and like tell each other the weather of the day, you know. Yeah, you just need to say, I'm cutting in front of you. That's all. Yeah. So this is something that I think we need to learn from our human civilization and put into LLMs, because LLM communication right now, if you use stuff like AutoGen, through AI, you know, this agents talk too much. We don't want that to happen. We want, when we want to communicate with one another, we only communicate what we need to communicate. And what this need to communicate is dependent on the task that you want to do. So driving, you just need to say, I'm going to go in front of you, I'm going to overtake you, I'm going to increase speed, you know, stuff that are relevant to the other driver.
So this remind me of either like in military or in aviation, right? They communicate with very succinct terms and jargons. I think that's also for the same reason, right?
Correct. So one thing that is interesting is, can the agent learn the communication strategy themselves? This will require years of research. I do think they can. All right. And but you need to ground it with some like pre-existing system that you're using already. Like they can learn the communication strategy. They can have a fixed strategy booklet given to all of them even before they talk, so that they don't need to transmit so much to one another. So this is like information theory. Like, I mean, code words is one way that military does it. And if we can do something like this, essentially we break down the problem from a very complex and open-ended one into a very narrow and very defined one, of which you will get much more information per syllabus that you talk compared to like free flow text. Yeah, so there's a lot of research that needs to be done in agent conversations, and I don't think we'll solve this problem easily. And eventually, this communication strategy needs to be self-learned, all right? Because you're not going to have the bandwidth to define for each environment how to communicate. The agents need to come up with the strategy themselves and learn. So this reminds me of this game called Hanabi. Have you ever played Hanabi before? Hanabi is a fireworks game. Who here has played it? Or who has heard of this game, Hanabi? No one? Okay, basically it's a game of collaboration where you need to, you know, build fireworks with one another by putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you cannot see your own cards. All right, so people need to tell you by hints like what your cards are. In order to win this game, you need to have fixed rules beforehand. Yeah, because if you don't do any fixed rules beforehand, you will run out of clues to tell each other of stuff. So you need to say that if I give my clue on the left or on the right, no, it means something. Like there's another game like this is called Bridge. Because in Bridge, you do bidding, right? Like, so there's this bidding system, like SACI bidding system, where, you know, like you bid like 2 clubs, 2 hearts. Maybe you're not even talking about the strength of your cards. You're talking about, I'm asking you a question. Do you have diamonds? And I bid something to tell you something. I double the bid so that I tell you something. Like this is a kind of constrained conversation environment where like you don't really need to do that for LLMs most of the time, because, you know, you can just talk freely. But stuff like this shows that, you know, like if you want the human or you want the LM to do well in this kind of game, you need to discuss the rules beforehand. All right, and this is something very important. Just now we just talked about humans, right? Humans already discuss the rules beforehand because we all go through driving training, right? So this is something very important. Okay? If you have already some framework to follow, you don't have to spend too much effort communicating and clarifying with one another. Yeah, and these are examples. By the way, RL agents do pretty well at these 2 games, but the strategy to communicate is most of it is already fed in. So
sorry, I want to clarify for the RL benchmark, how does the agent communicate between each other?
Oh, they just basically give the clues for Hanabi. There's no verbal communication.
So there's still some form of signal traveling between different agents?
You can only give clues. So the clues are official part of the game.
Like what?
Like I give you a tag that your card is red, or that these two cards are two. You know, like those are clues, number clues or color clues.
So you can think, so that's actually technically the feedback from the environment, right? The observation from environment. It's not like
Or the
explicit.
clues are given by players, so you actually need to take up an action to do it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so these two games are special in the sense that you cannot communicate with one another.
Because you know what, I'm suspecting why the reason RL can do better, especially for the one of the environment, the circle one, right? The latency of LLM communication is a very big problem. Because for human, why you form that kind of congestion is exactly because of latency, I feel. You need
Possible.
really like almost pseudo instantaneous action to avoid that kind of congestion in the ring, right? Because as soon as you have some delay in your action, then this delay keep accumulating and cause this problem. So if your whatever approach you use, the latency is less, you definitely have a very big advantage. So I think that's also tied back to here, like if you have more agents in the discussion, then the latency gets worse. It's like human meeting, you have a very big raw meeting, it's very ineffective. It's the same thing. So I agree. Localized discussion is it can help to improve that aspect, but the problem is how do you effectively segmentize into different subgroup for discussion, because you want to make sure within each subgroup you still maximize the useful information, right? So you need to find a very efficient way to divide them into different groups. Yeah. Make sure like in between each group, if there's isolation between different agents, then there's actually really no need of their communication. Yeah.
Great. I think those are great points. So like how we actually need to codify this into multi-agent frameworks requires a bit more experimentation. And I'm actually very excited to implement all this into Agent Joe. Like once we do the multi-agent conversation part, which will be, I think in next year, end of next year. So this is something that people have done a lot of research on in the RL space, like multi-agent RL. We just need to bring over some of these insights to multi-agent systems right now that we have. And communication is a huge part of it. Yeah, so yeah, looking forward to talk more about this in the next few sessions. And yeah, let's, in the interest of time, let's just try to wrap things up in like the next 5 minutes. So next question, all right? Next question, how can collaboration be done without hanging roles, but fixed roles? Okay, so over here, this is what I was saying, like, you already have a predefined structure to enter with. Like, for example, already like pre-allocate a leader. And, maybe you have two leaders and like two different convoys. You really pre-allocate all your stuff, and only when the situation calls for it, then we will change the leader and so on. Yeah. Any comments for this? Yeah, I think y'all will agree with me for this also. Like there's too much talking going on, and sometimes the leader follow role is not a very needed question to ask. Like you should just follow whoever's in front of you, right? For this case, right? Will a central planner be better or each individual agent be better? I would say that central planner to just like define roles, and the roles, and basically and leader will give duties or give tasks each of the followers. Like the task could be like follow me, that kind of stuff, or like catch up. Yeah. So this a good way to define like what each agent needs to do. But within each agent should have autonomy to do whatever it needs to fulfill that task. So this is what I'm talking about here. Okay, next, how can we improve the perception module? Is there a way to bring in multiple abstraction spaces for perception memory? So first up is to increase difficulty of environment. Okay, and then like use like vision, like maybe even audio kind of processing to process things. And then you have stored into respective memory. So like memory is actually based on input stimuli. And I mean, I've been reading books by this psychologist or neuroscientist called Nicholas Humphrey. And like basically the insights that I got from him is that your stimuli determines how we store memory. I really agree with this. So like there's no way to decouple memory from your stimuli. It's all based on what you can sense. Like you can't store memory of something that you have no idea what it is, right? If you cannot sense infrared or you cannot sense UV light, how do you store such memory? Like you don't. Yeah, so the way we store perception spaces and memory spaces depends on how we get the perception in and what environment stimuli there is. So we can't improve the perception module if there's no vision stimuli per se. Like, so I don't really think that we process things in math numbers. So like position of car, velocity, or this, not that great. But if we can see things, like we see how the car is in 3D, maybe this would give a better gauge of how we should avoid collision. All right. So first up, we need to use a 3D environment. So this is a bit ironic that we might actually perform better with current tech in a more difficult environment than we can in a simple one. Yeah, because the right space for processing things might be vision. I mean, Tesla self-driving is all vision, right? I mean, they tried to take away the what do you call it, laser rangefinder, LiDAR. They take away the LiDAR. So I mean, it's based on the fact that humans just need to use their eyes to navigate. Okay, so if we can just use vision to navigate, then you don't really need the detection sensors for all this. So, yep, my point is that we need to have environments that are suited for your perception for this to work out. Next, how can we do reasoning better? I think this one needs to be done using some form of like knowledge consolidation after each experience. And maybe you store the reasoning trace in a graph. Like for example, if let's say I increase speed, and then the like result, I collided for car in front of me. And the reasoning trace do not increase speed if car is within 1 meter. So it's very hard to come up with the reasoning trace because there's 1 million ways or more to reason about things. How do you know what's the right reason, right? So I think this is something that you need some grounding. Like you need to say that, hey, the environment only can do this few actions, and these are the few outcomes, and the reason why an outcome happened might be because you're too fast, you're too slow. There needs to be some grounding for reasoning, and there's no easy way to do it. So good luck for the people researching this. I do think that reasoning is something hard, and I do feel like the way ahead will be to have handcrafted reasoning, like facts that we have already synthesized and put inside the LLM as context. If we want the LLM to generate its own reasoning, I'm afraid that it will hallucinate a lot. So I mean, I beg to differ if we have tech for it, but right now for reasoning, I would say it's still best for a human to actually come up with the rules for the LLM to follow. I mean, we can store the reasoning trace in the graph. I'm just not too sure whether the graph will be updated correctly.
But if you use human reasoning traces to ground, then I use an analogy of AlphaGo and AlphaGo 0. You cannot surpass human reasoning, right?
So this is the question I have to ask. Like, do we really need the reasoning to do actions? Like, so if most of the cases we just need to have past memory of like what happened when certain actions are done and the outcome, like we may not even need the reasoning trace to do it, then actually reasoning is secondary.
Then if that's the case, I would argue that you don't even need a very big LLM, just need a very small one. Open source one will do. I think the only reason to scale up LLM is to do reasoning. To do good reasoning.
Yeah. So for this reasoning part, I'm still half on it because like I do think reasoning is important to filter the search space. Like for example, if it rains, I bring an umbrella, right? So I don't need to search through my house for all the items that can prevent me from getting wet. I can reason that okay, umbrella prevents rain from coming in. It means waterproof. Hence, I should get some waterproof material to cover me when it rains. Yeah. So with that, logic in mind, I know how I can cover myself the next time it rains without, like experimenting. Hey, is this paper okay? Is this tissue okay? I don't need to go through that because I know, okay, I need to be waterproof. Okay. But like, how do we get all these insights? We actually learn them through school, like it's through lots of experimentation and before finding out what's the right reason. Like right now, we also don't even know, like, is coffee bad for you? Or is coffee good for you? Like a lot of people are saying different things. It's very hard to get a good reasoning because there's just so many things that could happen to get you the outcome.
I think in that example, right, that's because you don't have a, if you will, like a well agreed, like a widely agreed fact to ground your reasoning on. Because based on different premises, you can have a valid reasoning go leads to completely different conclusion, right? So in that sense, I agree that you need to ground the reasoning. But then that's another question. Like then there's a question of how do you determine what is considered factual, right? But I don't think that's really relevant to the how to do sound reasoning itself. Yeah. And I also feel the kind of example you gave is, I mean, it's important, but there are other part, like let's say, for example, in coding, right? There's some very complex logic, and if you want your LLM to be able to do a good job at software engineering or coding, it requires much more complex reasoning. So it's not just very simple daily intuition. Yeah.
All right, but I do agree that having some reasoning outcomes from your experiences would improve performance in the future because you can take those learnings. It's like, summarizing like many different experiences into one like potential reason. Like for example, the rain one, like, okay, I should take materials related to like raincoat, umbrella, because like it helps with the rain. So like maybe you don't know the real reason yet, but if you just summarize what you have observed so far into some statement like that, perhaps it's already very useful for future tasks.
I agree.
Yeah.
Even for human, a lot of times we don't know the actual reason, right? But we know the outcome. Then you can use that outcome as part of your fact to ground your reasoning. You don't really need to ultimately know what's the ultimate reason. Yeah, that's not really necessary.
Yeah. It's like, when I run, I feel very tired, right? I don't need to know, oh, my lungs use oxygen and then
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah.
burn the glucose. I just need to know, oh, if I run too much, I'm tired. That's enough. That's enough to ground your next action. Like, okay, maybe next time I shouldn't run for the bus so much. Yeah. So we don't need to know the exact mechanics of how the body works.
But yes, but it really depends on use case, because that's for your daily activity, daily routine. Yes, but if you want, like there's research want to use LLM to do scientific research, then you have to know. So it really depends on use case. Yeah.
That is true, but I liked your earlier example when you brought up coding, because for me, I see coding as like kind of like an abstraction space. Depending, you have to learn the language and what language you're coding and everything. It's an abstraction space you learn, and then you connect that abstraction space to other abstraction spaces, and it's kind of like a graph, but you're connecting abstraction spaces as nodes in order to trace a certain outcome you want, and then you use that graph kind of abstraction space reasoning. So for me, I think what it is for true reasoning, I think what can be done is that we can get it to where we can learn abstraction spaces in a kind of abstraction space soup. So kind of like we have memory soup, we can also have like an abstraction space soup. And then that soup can be traced in certain ways in certain types of graphs or hypergraphs for much higher level reasoning, but we'll get there. And then this kind of tracing and experimentation it's kind of like simulation, but you're simulating with abstraction spaces and connecting them as nodes. And you kind of trace through this and connect different concepts. And these concepts, I don't feel have to be complex, right? Like coding is a certain abstraction space and you learn certain things. It's a little bit muscle memory, it's a little bit pattern recognition, it's all these kind of different things that are all small, but you combine them together into an abstraction space. And it works really well because you can connect them with other abstraction spaces and have a lot of creative potential. But it's just my thoughts.
Sorry,
spitting
I
out
just
there.
want to follow up on that because I'm also interested in this topic.
Mm.
So, I feel like for those LM, let's say O1 or 3.5 Sonnet, which can already do a very good or decent job at coding or problems debugging, right? They might have already learned some form of implicit graph, like what you mentioned, and so, but my question is there any existing like coding assistant that's not LM based also can do the same level, can solve the same level of complex debugging or software engineering question that is based on things like a symbolic approach or like is it based on like a memory graph, that kind of approach? Because if that's truly not that difficult, then I would assume that there should be some existing way of doing it, right? But currently, I only know LM-based coding assistant.
That is a good point. The only thing I could think of coming to mind symbolically might be expert systems like Lisp and so like way back. And they weren't bad, but the problem was they had to hard code everything. There wasn't really like a neural network shortcut they could take that could just train on stuff. It just kind of like abstract, right? Like be imprecise but be pretty close, and they just build upon it.
Yeah.
They had to hard code everything. And again, that's the problem with symbolic coding and symbolic approaches and implementations is that they're
Not
very
simple.
helpful. Yeah, they're very helpful because you can directly convert your ideas into automation, but you have to do everything manually. As opposed to the neural network, you give up control over the outputs and you let the neural network do some of the decision making for you, but it's able to do more on its own and able to make decisions for itself during the training process about how to go from the input to the output, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I also think, practically speaking, it's probably a more realistic approach of using LM to learn this implicit knowledge graph, like what you described just now. And I feel like because based on my own experience, right, LM do hallucinate much less on coding tasks compared to if I ask other questions. That's probably also because they give a lot of high quality and large amount of training data on that, which means that you can have all these different strategies to mitigate the hallucination, which probably give you a clearer or better graph, like implicit knowledge graph. Yeah, and also feel like, to me, that's because for example, am I using coding assistant in some of my project? Honestly, it's pretty complicated, and if the LM can actually solve that problem, to me, it's like a vibe check, right? It feels like, because my problem is so specific to my own use case, if the LM can clearly solve this problem 100% accuracy, that really feels like a very good how should I, a proof of generalization, because you can't really find the exact exact problem I have anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been covered in a couple papers for mathematics and coding. Those two things are the most explicitly general or how to explain it, explicitly stated things, right? Like all the knowledge that comes that you need for coding and mathematics is so explicit that the LLM is able to implicit it the best into its own network, as you said, as a kind of like knowledge graph implicitly. And I think that has a lot to do with the way coding and mathematics work, is that they are abstractions and expressions of how humans think, right? Like they literally are abstractions and expressions of how.
Yeah.
So they're super simple to pick up on because all the rules are explicitly stated, right? And I think it has a lot to do with symbolic programming a lot too, because it's the same thing. It's that in symbology, it's all about explicit stating. So once we built upon that and started using neural networks, we got our hardware upgraded. The neural networks were able to approach it the best and learn it implicitly the best because we already did all the work for it. We already did all the
Yes,
explicit
I agree.
explaining and all the explicit explaining and reasoning for it. All it has to do is just learn it. It doesn't have to do anything on its own.
So
It's
it's
very
like we are using a generative approach to mimic to the best of its capability, symbolic approach.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people confuse that with like stochasticity and the stochastic parrot, and it's not, because it has to abstract from it. So it's doing its own thing and actually learning, but it's very easy to learn because we did all of the hard work for it.
You need to give a framework for it to learn in.
Exactly. It's a framework. It's the framework's already there. It just has to pick up on it. It's very simple jump. Stuff
Right.
that's more, yeah, stuff that's more general and there's much less information and logic to it, much less framework to it. It's much more messy, much more soupy, which is such a weird thing to say. But those things are much harder to learn because you have to learn your own rules. You have to establish your own rules implicitly and then build upon it to actually create a knowledge base in an implicit neural network graph system. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, great discussion actually. I'd like to continue this, but because in the interest of time, maybe we'll do a reasoning paper next week. Maybe we do the paper that Apple says that, LLMs can't reason. Maybe we talk about that. Yeah, I think that will be very interesting to see like how do we imbue reasoning inside the systems? How do we give the framework for reasoning? Like I do think there's a lot of valid points here, and this is something that won't be solved in the next 5 years or so. Like I do feel even humans haven't solved reasoning. We are still trying to pattern match, and pattern match may or may not lead to the correct reasoning, but you don't need the right reasoning to function, right? You just need a reasoning that is good enough so that you don't make the same mistakes. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like you can research on human culture, superstition, like you eat hard-boiled eggs before an exam, that kind of stuff. Does it link to good grades? May not be, but people eat it just in case. Yeah, so like stuff like this may be incorrect reasoning, but it doesn't affect your daily life and people move on. So I'm kind of aligned to something like that. Like I think reasoning is helpful, but you don't have to have the right reasoning all the time. Okay, yeah. So I mean that's my point. We can talk more about it next time. All right, I'll go on to the last question. So the last question is like, oh sorry, this one, do LMs understand numbers well? No. All right. So any benchmark using math and stuff, it's just barking up the wrong tree. All right.
But I do have one comment here, just a short one.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think it's wrong to optimize or train LLM just for the sake of getting the better result on numbers or mathematics related benchmark. But I still think it's a good indicator of how good the LLM is in terms of reasoning. Yeah, but it shouldn't be the actual objective to maximize, because we are by the end of the day we are not going to use it for mathematical calculation, but it's still a good surrogate, if you will, to gauge how good your model is good at reasoning. Yeah. That's my take on it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and also our benchmarks need to be a bit less static. Right now, all the benchmarks are static that I can see, and that means that it's very high potential for memorization to do well. Like I don't really like those benchmarks that you can just simply memorize.
Yeah, exactly. If you train, let's say if O1 is not even trained on mathematics, but it improves on mathematics, then that would be the ideal case. Yeah.
Then we have reached some form of general intelligence where you can transfer across domains. However, I don't think intelligence is very general at all. We have to be domain specific, because you can only learn the domain specific quirks at that domain. But what we can do is we can have a framework whereby you can keep learning in that domain using that framework. Like you store things in memory, use memory to improve, and so on. Like once you have a certain framework that is already working, that framework might be able to plug and play in any environment. And that's the system that I'm trying to aim for. Yeah, not an LM that's been trained on all the training set, but it's a framework for learning that can be plugged to any environment. Yeah. Okay, last question. Okay, with LM agentic framework, why does it perform poorer than RL for merge scenario? And I think this one is maybe it's too much talking. And like merge scenario is maybe less cognitive than the ring or figure of eight. Because like the cognitive portion of it is like I want to cut in front of you, but it might be easier to just use the RL figures to decide who will cut ahead rather than talk to one another. Yeah. So next is, will the LLM framework adapt fast in real time? I mean, I would say yes, if the right kind of basis is given to modify the prompt or memory. Yeah, because if you anyhow modify your memory, sometimes you get poorer results. Right. So this one really depends. But I do see a lot of promise with LLMs as a adapter or adaptive learner, and RL as a fixed environment optimizer. So I think the two can work hand in hand, as the RL as the lower part and the LM as the top part. Yeah. Last minute, any other things you want to discuss before we conclude?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Derek, please.
No, I was just gonna say that covers everything. It's pretty good.
Yeah, so I'll just go back to this diagram again to just do concluding remarks. So overall, I think CoMAL is a good framework to try to link together multi-agent systems to collaborate, and then each agent execute their plan independently. It tries to use some memory to ground it and then updates the memory again. So that kind of updating architecture, like learning from the environment, is great. There are some like small little things here and there that LM is not that great for, like numbers. So like if they could automate more of the pipeline with rule-based system, that would be better. But the other key insight is that RL-based systems or like rule-based systems should be done all the way at the bottom, like RL-based or rule-based, because these are more like you want to do more concrete rule following. LMs are not good for that. LMs exist better at the top layer, where it's a bit more adaptive. It can react to different environment stimuli and choose a higher level plan, which is executed by a low level rule-based thing. So I would say that CoMAL is a great first step in this kind of adaptive learning architectures. And I'm looking forward to see future iterations of this and implement this on even more challenging environments. And yeah, with that, signing out. Thanks everyone for staying, and bye.